Alright, you guys, this is Mr. Portillo. Today we are going to talk about the Mayan Empire. The Mayan Empire. Please copy that which is underlined because it will be on the quiz that I'll be giving you. The Mayan Empire, let's look at a map. As you can see, this is a map of Central America. As you can see, Mexico is on the west, and this green area which is actually lower Mexico, Chiapas you have here, and Belize, and this is the Yucatan Peninsula, and then you have the Gulf of Mexico. So these are the areas in which the Mayan Empire ruled. Okay, so most of the in this area, which is orange or brown, is the Aztec Empire, and here in the green is the Mayan. So we're going to talk about the Mayans, the Mayan Empire. Alright, so everything that's underlined, please. The Mayans create city-states, and so their main homeland was actually stretched from the southern tip of Mexico into Central America. So we're talking about southern Mexico and northern Central America, like El Salvador, Nicaragua, so places like that. And so it had highland regions and had lowland regions. So the highlands were very cool, cloudy. Um, it included parts of, like I said before, Mexico and El Salvador. The lowlands were actually considered northern Guatemala. They were very dry, a lot of forests. It's still part of the Yucatan Peninsula, so a lot of steamy jungles. So a lot of jungles. Um, and it's around 250 years after Christ. The Mayan culture had burst forth and became a huge, flourishing civilization. So make sure you copy everything that's underlined. All right, so the classic period from 250 AD to 900 AD is known as the classic period of the Mayan civilization. And you will see in the picture in the next slide, it was during this time that many archaeologists today have found and discovered um, over tens of hundreds of major Mayan sites. You'll see huge monuments that were built by the Mayans during this time. And so each of these places, one example is being Tikal, was a ruled by one king who was considered a god or a god king. And so many of the features of these giant structures called pyramids or temples and palaces, many were dedicated to these god kings, very important rulers. It also These Mayan cities had these ball courts where they would play, kind of like this football, soccer kind of game, which had a lot of religious and political significances. So here's an image of a Mayan pyramid. Doesn't really look like the pyramids of Giza, which were created by the Egyptians, but similar structures, as you can see. And you can see some people walking up. So it's a pretty big structure. And here's a picture of a court, a ball court. I guess it would look like a place where they would. Not much is known about the sport, but a few things that are known is that it was a place to basically play. And so it was a place that had a religious significance. It was played kind of like soccer. Not a lot is known of how exactly the sport was actually played. By looking at the next image, you see this is actually like a hoop, almost like a hoop. And so, to many archaeologists, anthropologists, their best guess is that this was used for kicking. They would kick the ball inside this little hoop. All right, so trade and agriculture. There were many city-states that were independent of each other. They still had alliances among themselves. So they were all Mayan, just different cities. And so one of the things that kept them together was agriculture. They all shared the same agriculture. They would grow corn or maize, beans, frijoles, squash, and this is what gave them their sustenance. This is what made them survive. And they would also trade with the other city states. It could be chocolate. It could be any other. It didn't have dollar bills and $20 bills like we do now, but it was more of materials and things that they needed. Okay. Also they also practiced slash and burn farming and other farming techniques. All right, and the Mayan society had a lot of successful farming methods, and which created very wealthy social classes. Right, you had the noble class, the middle class, and then the ones at the bottom, the peasants. And at the very top, you had the Mayan king, who was the top of the class structure. All right, and the Mayan religion they were polytheistic, meaning that they believed in many gods. They had gods for food, gods for death, for weather, and they worshipped in them many ways. And of course, they also had human sacrifices where they pierced their own bodies and offered their own blood to nourish their gods. Another belief that they had was a calendar, and so their religious beliefs led them to create a calendar using mathematics and astronomy. And so, by all this knowledge, they were able to harness the idea and the structures of how stars are situated in the sky. How stars are, how, let's say, the North Star is over here, the Milky Way is over there. How do we know that? Well, because the Aztecs basically measured them. For years and years and years, they would study until they finally got a pattern of how the stars were aligned in the sky. And here's one of the calendars that they have. Most of you have seen these calendars before. And their written language was one of the most advanced systems in the Americas. And so they had around 800 hieroglyphic symbols, and in which these images actually stood for words and syllables. So, and here is an image of their language. As you can see, some of them have pictures, and you see hands and maybe some animals or heads, things like that. And the fall of the Maya. In the late 800s, the Mayans suddenly abandoned many of the cities, and that's what we're going to be finding out. Some people say it's because of warfare among the various city-states. They wouldn't trade with each other, a lot of jealousy perhaps, and maybe there was population growth, and the land was being overfarmed, which can happen, and people ran out of food. The end.